let me jump right into the topic. I want to tell you that I think that mobility is a highly ethical component of our lives, because not everyone is as free to move whatever kind of transport mode I want, to whichever time, to whatever place I would like to go to. And our mobility patterns are highly correlated with our socioeconomic characteristics that we have, such as age, income, ethnicity, health, but also with gender. And you could have a talk on each of those topics and characteristics, and everything of it is very exciting. But today we'll focus on the topic of gender and mobility. And before we get to the point where I explain you what it has to do with AI and what the use case is, I first have to explain you one thing about mobility patterns of females and men. So this is Thomas. It's a stereotype or an example for a male mobility pattern. Usually his day looks like this. He works at the airport BER in Berlin and lives in Spandau, and he's a very busy guy. So he usually gets up in the morning, has breakfast with the kids, and he moves from the suburban area somewhere in and goes to the airport. He goes in the car, goes to work, spends there 8 to 9 hours, and goes back directly home, probably helps his kids with the homework, has dinner, goes to the gym afterwards with the bike, and goes back again. That's a typical image, and it looks quite straightforward, I guess. And this is Claudia, that's his wife, and she works part-time close to Spandau, close to Berlin. And her mornings usually looks like this. She gets up, gets the kids ready for kindergarten and school, walks them there, and then she hops on a bus to work, where she spends like 4, 5, 6 hours. Then she gets back with the bus, picks up the kids, brings them to their afternoon sports. And then she goes to the supermarket while the kids are at their community center, goes to bring the groceries to her parents that are not doing so well anymore. So to help them, she covers up for them. She goes back to pick up the kids from the community center, goes back home, and you will see that those patterns are usually a bit more complex. And some of you might be like, oh, okay, this is so stereotypical. But the data shows us that on average, female mobility patterns are still different. So let's have a look what the numbers show us. So we see in general that women have a higher number of trips a day. We saw that in the picture. The travel distances are shorter. They spend less time a day on travel. They tend to have more non-work related trips. They travel off-peak hours, and they also use more flexible transport modes. Women also tend to experiment less with their mobility choices, so they make more pragmatic choices usually. They don't use technology so often, like shared mobility. They rather try to stick with what they already know. Sometimes it's also that the technologies don't really fit their needs. So as I already mentioned here in the pictures, they are more often accompanied with children and elderly, so they often don't travel alone. They tend to have less access to a car, are more often passengers in cars, and are less likely to have a driver's license. So this brings them to use more public transport, to walk more, and also to cycle more when it's perceived safe. And so women's mobility patterns on average are greener than the mobility patterns of men, not just because they have less access to a car, but also because the aspect of sustainability is more of something they think about when they make a transport choice. And they're also less willing to take risks. So for example, use a car in car sharing that they haven't used before is something that they are less willing to do, or using the new e-scooter service in the city is something that most women don't feel like doing. So that was a long list, but maybe you'll be like, okay, what does it have to do with this topic? It's an interesting thing, different mobility patterns. So what? So research shows that when gender is not explicitly part of the city and traffic planning process, that the solutions are most likely to primarily benefit men in their mobility behavior. Whereas the explicit consideration of gender through the whole planning process, like design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation, is more likely to create a more gender equal solution. And despite already 40 years of research in this field and of gender mainstreaming policies, it's not really systematically implemented and included in these processes. So transport and mobility are not gender neutral. The International Transport Forum has concluded that actually gender is the one most robust determinant of a transportation choice. And in addition, gender segregated data on travel behaviors, on trips and needs and concerns are either not collected or they're not really systematically analyzed. So this creates an unconscious bias towards men in transport and mobility planning. And here's one example that is very simple, but very something you probably use all the time. So there's an average standard for walking speed in mobility planning. It's 5 kilometers per hour. And there are field studies that show that women tend to walk slower, like 3.5 kilometers per hour, also because they have more often kids with them. But this standard of 5 kilometers per hour is used in city planning. And also this standard is used in all of your apps that you probably use for navigation. It's a standard that is also used by Google Maps when you navigate through the city. So data is often treated as if it was neutral, but however, previous research shows that data sets are often somehow biased, somehow in between, and that there are gaps all around. There was a study 2020 from 140 transport experts, mostly females, and they were asked about the state of play of the terms of transport data. And 93%, so an overwhelming majority, felt that the data and the information that was collected by the sector is inadequate of making gender sensitive and inclusive transport decisions. So gender sensitive data is primarily lacking, as mobility data is often collected and analyzed from a more male and traditional perspective. And there are some data sets and some studies that are very widely used. For example, the Mobility in Germany, the MID, or the System of Representative Transport Survey. And when you have a closer look at how the data is collected, you'll see that there is a potential for gaps. A very concrete example from the MID, which is commissioned by the German Federal Ministry of Digital and Transport. It was last in 2017 that they collected the data. So participants should give a reason why they are doing a trip. And as you can see here, you have 9 options that you can choose from, but multiple answers were not allowed. So we've seen before that often the male travel patterns are quite straightforward and it's easy to put one reason to the trip. Here in the mobility pattern of females, it's a little bit more complex. So the data is most likely not very representative for mobility patterns of females. So as we've heard yesterday already, and what we probably continue talking about is that AI can only be as good as the data. And also that we are eventually the ones that create this data. So there are many human biases and you can't really get rid of all of them. But in this case, it's especially tricky because our decision makers in cities use this aforementioned data for the decision-making process. And city planners are using this for optimizing, for example, traffic flows in city or the allocation of parking space, and also for the planning of public transport. And also companies, private companies use those data for the optimization of their products. So the decisions that politicians make and the infrastructure that city planners are planning out for us and the services that private companies offer eventually set the framework and the possibilities for all of you to move in the public realm, or maybe also limit your choices. And I can assure you that the hype of AI in the mobility sector is tremendous at the moment. So it's almost certain that we'll see more and more AI in charge of managing our mobility in the near future. And while it's sometimes, a little, annoying that there is no gender-sensitive data, it can also be very dangerous. It's an often cited problem, but I think it's very important that the lack of an average female crash test dummy and the therefore missing data it's a good example of how you use the average male as a stand-in for all humans. And it means that all women involved in a crash test, in a crash, have a almost 50% higher likelihood to be injured more drastically, and also to be 17% more likely to die. Less drastic, but still a very important topic at the moment is shared mobility. And when you look at the numbers, it's really a male thing. Many shared car services started with 90% of male users. Some have 60%, 75%, but there is a pattern that not just car sharing, but also scooter sharing, e-bike sharing are also mostly used by men. So I was wondering, maybe this is also a self-made problem. And one aspect here is the algorithms that those services use. So with the help of the calculation process, the sharing providers usually optimize the number of vehicles waiting for customers at a given time, and also where to relocate them. And as long as and the data that is used for this optimization is used with each rental. And as long as the predominantly men borrow those vehicles, the algorithm will always continue optimizing the service for the users that they have. So I wonder if this could be a self-enforcing effect, because, for example, when you relocate the car, according to the algorithm, what the algorithm proposes, you probably put it in a place where men are more likely to get through. Our cars are also getting smarter and smarter by the day, with various assistant programs based on AI methods. And there's also a very common phrase at the moment in the sector when you talk with people. It's they say that cars will become computers on wheels, and that eventually the software technology will be more interesting for clients than the engineering of the car itself. And all the larger car manufacturers in Germany, in Silicon Valley, but also in China, are working on self-driving vehicles. Very interesting technology, very complex, and also heavily relies on AI methods. So I see yet another possibility that there might be another bias when you use this data from those cars, because you see, in Germany, we are leading in AV technology, one of the countries that is most advanced, but we're also one of the most skeptic nations when it comes to self-driving cars. 35% of men and 19% of women have confidence in self-driving cars. So there's another imbalance here, and maybe yet another problem for the future. So I wonder, when those self-driving vehicles are again fed with training data that are predominantly given by early adopters and tech savvy male users, what does it mean for the evolvement of those self-driving cars? So there are a few takeaways that I would like you to take away from this talk. And first of all, transport infrastructure and mobility services shape our choices. You can only use what is there. And the collected mobility data is often used to improve the transport structure and those mobility services. And yet, most of this collected data somehow have biases. And one of those biases is called the gender data gap. The use of this data with AI methods is most likely to recreate and reinforce some existing bias. And since AI methods are used more and more in the mobility sector and will shape the way we can move around in the cities, it's very important to shed some light on this topic. So to avoid this bias or make it as small as can be, we need more awareness in city and traffic planning, which is called gender mainstreaming, but we also need more gender sensitive data that needs to be collected. And we also need to get more knowledge out there in the companies, but also in the city administrations, how to adjust existing data sets and how to use ethical AI principles. So that's the end of my talk here. I'll just slowly, for a second, move on to the next slide. Because as you've already heard, my dear colleague Michael Punschu will not be here with us today. He unfortunately caught corona, just happens these days. And he told me to give you a warm hello from him and hopes to meet you sometime. It's especially a pity because one of the focuses of the iRightsLab, next to the smart mobility focus that we have, is actually on AI and ethics. And we have some interesting projects that also Michi worked on, for example, the algo rules, where he, with the partners of Bertelsmann, has developed a catalog of formal criteria enabling the social beneficial design of algorithms and also how to get them out there and put them in place. A second project that is still an ongoing thing is ZVKI. It's a central place for debate in Germany. The Center for Trustworthy Artificial Intelligence wants to make the developments around social and ethical questions around AI and algorithmic systems more tangible. And it's a project we do with the Ministry of Environment and Consumer Protection. With the AI ethic label, we try to bring these ethical principles actually into practice. And we'll put some of these resources that you see here in the Moodle, I think that you use for this course, so you can have a look. But we would also like to offer you that you can reach out to us and we can probably coordinate a follow-up meeting, because I think Michael Punschu is someone that shouldn't be missing in your collection of AI and ethics experts. So write it down, my email address, Michi's email address. We'd be really happy to do a follow-up meeting with you guys and probably be able to present those approaches a little more, since we had to cancel the workshop today, which is really unfortunate. So get in touch with us. That's it.
So good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having us here today. And also, it was great to hear the previous talk. Very interesting. So we are, as presented earlier, from the Dreaming Beyond AI collective. It's gonna make more sense in a couple of minutes, I hope, because we're gonna talk about our project and why we did what we did, what are we doing, and how. And as mentioned earlier, it's also connected to the topics of structural problems, inequalities, and inequities, and also with their historic roots that we want to talk about. So here we go. Yes.
So we are gonna start with explaining a little bit about the project, and then I will present you the team, contributors, the why we are doing this, the how. We are gonna explain you our talks, presentation, exhibition, and as you as artificial intelligence as portal. Then we are gonna explain you the curatorial frame and questioning intelligence.
Okay, so this is a very hybrid project that is quite dynamic in the sense that it gets being shaped and redefined according to the people it invites to the space. You can see this if you visit the website, and I would suggest that you visit it on your desktop on your own with maybe headphones to really immerse yourself in the experience, because it starts with a meditation and then there's music and very interesting visual elements that are designed by Iyo, who is here. So this is a multidisciplinary and collaborative web-based project. And I think its innovative side is that it brings together artists, researchers, activists, and policymakers to create new narratives and visions around AI technologies. And we will understand we will talk about it in a minute, why we think we need new narratives and new visions. So the project aims to enable understanding the impact of AI technologies on inequity and questioning mainstream narratives, as well as imposed visions of the future. So the project is conceptualized by Nushin Yazdani, who is a designer and an artist who is not here today, and myself. And for the rest of our team, I hand it to Iyo.
Yes, so the project is in collaboration with IFA. The web platform is designed and coded by me, and the communication strategy has been created by Sarah Diedro. We also have got special advisor for dreaming beyond AI, like Sarah Chunder and Dr. Nakima, who are senior policy advisor. Dreaming Beyond AI is a collective of 20 people across the world with artists, researchers, writers, activists, designers, scientists, community organizer, dreamer, and thinker. We've got the chance to work, for example, with Nima Giter, artist, theorist, and creator. They explore love and indigeneity in time of algorithm debris.
Okay, so there are already many people and initiatives who are working on AI ethics, right, or the impacts of AI. Why we wanted to also come up with a hybrid project and a collective like this. So my background is in policy, and I actually worked as an AI policy researcher for 2.5 years before, and we all have different backgrounds in research and activism and art and so on. And we started to realize that there was this important raise of consciousness about the negative impacts of technology, especially that it was affecting marginalized communities disproportionately. Because, before that, and one can argue that we still have this, at least on more like collective level, this blind belief or reliance on technology. Maybe it's not, for us or for you, but especially people who don't work with technology in a professional way, we can observe a little bit of this kind of belief and over-reliance. And it was important for us to understand, how a technology that is marketed and presented as something that is going to deeply change the way the economy, the political systems, the social systems, the way we relate to each other. It was important for us to understand this, but we realized that most of this discourse was situated in the United States and not so much maybe in Europe in the way we wanted to see. So that's why we were also thinking that we need to be aware of the context in which this technological revolution is taking place right now, and what are the other constraints or crises that we need to be aware of, so that we shape our technological trajectories accordingly. And for example, for us, climate crisis or increasing inequality, and you know, the discussions and need for social justice are a must, and they need to be centered in this project. And the other part is also inclusion, and you might have seen maybe some numbers or reports. I think there was one by AI Now in 2017 and another one in 2019 showing the percentage of women and other marginalized groups or ethnical and other racial groups in the AI labs of biggest technological companies. And we can, when we look at the regulators or policymakers, especially in Europe, we can see a similar picture. But when we look at the users, we see that it's international, and it's basically a lot of different people and groups who are differently impacted. So it was also important for us to center this question and make sure that we are striving for more and more inclusion, inequity in the way we operate and in the way we bring together different visions. So also, why different visions? Because we think and feel that you know, the narratives or imaginaries that we have about technology shape the technology, and vice versa. This is a socio-technical system. You might have heard this several times, maybe during the summer school. So that if we want to strive for technologies, technological presence, and futures that are beneficial for us, all of us, and the planet, we need to also take into consideration what are the narratives and imageries, what we project onto these technologies, what are the driving ideas and core values, and how we might want to change them in order to make it work for all of us. So that's why we wanted to bring research, advocacy, policymaking, and art together in order to make a deeper impact about these deeper structures and historical roots of the problems that we're talking about today.
Understand, question, reimagine. We use this methodology as a loop. This methodology is inserted in an iterative process, actually. So first you have to understand exactly what is artificial intelligence. And then after you start questioning, and then you can reimagine, as we just, as Duse just say about new vision, reimagine what could be AI. It was important for us to use intersectional feminist and design justice principle as a foundation for the process and outcome of this work. We want the community building and collaboration to be driving force of the platform. The outcome should be shaped according to the need of our community we work with. We want the digital thing to create low threshold access through different media like video, game, podcast, and artwork. That's why we're also doing some talk, exhibition, and workshop.
Yes, like this one and the next ones that you might see in this list. And if you'd like to go deeper into the project and where we're coming from, you could also have a look at those. And just to say, just to underline again this hybrid dimension of the project, we're also doing physical exhibitions as COVID and, you know, other conditions allow us. Oops. There you go.
So what is artificial intelligence for us? How do we conceptualize and understand artificial intelligence? AI, as a scientific discipline and industry, have its own discourse and methodology. Artificial intelligence is a collection of concepts. We see and employ artificial intelligence as technology, concept, business, scientific discipline, discourse. As a complex construct, the AI ecosystem has ecological, social, political, economic, symbolic, and emotional infrastructures that unfold its current oppressive version. Rather than focusing on the idea of the technical artifact, we wanted to focus on the negative space. So we consider AI as a portal to broader societal issues and power dynamics.
So basically, conceptualizing this umbrella term for a set of techniques and technologies in a weird way, in the sense that we're looking at this to look at other things that are upholding this complex and vast concept that is understood as AI by many people differently. And so when you enter the platform, once you are basically entering the space that we call the pluriverse, and my background is coming from also is a snapshot of the pluriverse, you will see big bubbles of water that represent the different themes that we identified in this, think, research, learn, and exhibition type of space. And one can ask why these are the themes that you have and where this is coming from and what was the purpose. So the purpose in this iteration, because each iteration or each year we are aiming to change the project and for it to evolve according to the needs of the communities and people that we work with. This was basically the things that you needed to question or unpack when your mom and her friends or your grandma is asking you, what do you do? What about artificial intelligence? What is it? What makes it important that we understand and address its social impacts in the present and in the future? So some of them are, for example, we're going to talk about intelligence, the concept of intelligence, and why it is important for us to think about it. Some of it is about relationality. How do we approach? How can we approach relationality? What does that mean? Why it can be maybe a path that we can take going forward in the way we understand individuals and societies and how we relate to each other, and who are the thinkers that can help us in this way, and how would we design technologies if we understood each other as relational beings rather than Western individualistic atomized individuality and this abstract understanding of objective knowledge and so on. So these are the themes that you can basically go read about, and also when you're in them, you're going to see that there are different kinds of contributions.
So intelligence is one of our team. If intelligence is one of the foundations of artificial intelligence, how can we understand, question, and redefine it? Are there other forms of intelligence that artificial should reflect or already reflect? Should we abandon the notion of intelligence completely? How can we envision a future present where intelligence is not creating hierarchy and inequality among humans and non-humans? We can study the mind, the body intelligence, network, decision trees, knowledge trees, anything that inspire and can inspire artificial intelligence in the past, present, futures. And for this, for example, we can see that we've got some contribution of Tabitha Rezer. Tabitha Rezer did a meditation and did an article about how can we just meditate into the theme of intelligence. It's also allow us to question a lot. Nima Gitter and Petya Ivanova write an article about miscellaneous memory and miscellaneous internet. So we've got a lot of contribution to all the themes that can go deeper and also answering some of the questions that we are asking with the team.
So all in all, I think how we look at this is that artificial intelligence is a vast topic that makes humans think about a lot about themselves and the society and the culture that they have built. So I don't think we can bypass the question of what is, for example, being a human. What does it mean to be intelligent? What does it mean to feel? What does it mean to live together? And also the questions of biases that we also talked about in the previous talk today. So that's why I think it's very fruitful and vast. And what we're trying to also, I think, catalyze is a work on ourselves, our ways of understanding, our collective ideas and assumptions that drive also the technological sphere. in the hope that we can create alternatives and we can actually take responsibility and design different outcomes and work for them. And for this, we also wanted to break the silos between, you know, what is considered research, academic research. It's only academic sources, and there is a very kind of strict format, but memes, videos, or like something that can be seen as very mundane or not so serious or academic can be a great conversation starter, and especially very attractive for people who don't know this topic or who don't know that they're interacting with an AI when their Gmail, let's say, sorts an email as a spam or not, or like how their Instagram recommendation algorithm work and so on. So there's also this aim for you know, finding ways to make this accessible and fun to talk about, and I think prompt for self-reflection and taking responsibility in you know, instead of only complaining about the world, making it a better place right now by ourselves. So this is the end of our presentation. We would appreciate if you have any questions of any requests for collaboration. You can write to us on hello@dreamingbeyondai. You can connect with us on Instagram and Twitter. On Instagram, we do sometimes Instagram lives where we invite the artists and we just talk about fun topics. And we also do workshops, physical exhibitions, and talks like this. So feel free to reach out to us if you would like to collaborate or ask other questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and super excited to share you how we are using AI to basically help try to preserve trees and forests and nature. So let me share the presentation. And let me know if you don't see it or don't hear, just a quick thumbs up and I'll be able to respond. So this presentation, as correctly already mentioned, is discussing the use of artificial intelligence to help restore the natural world. And it's based on top of research in university, as well as also in a nonprofit called GainForest that uses AI to monitor nature and value natures. And maybe before we even get started with the whole artificial intelligence section, I just want to have you guys, because you already had 2 talks to listen to, enjoy a little bit the sounds of forests and maybe tell me what you think about it when you hear these sounds. So you can hear the sounds of forest when you're walking through, and the biodiversity of the birds, the wind that goes through the leaves. And I don't know how you feel, but every time I hear these, I imagine myself sitting on a pond somewhere very close, or like seeing like lakes and trees and animals. And there's no surprise that we humans feel very relaxed when we hear these sounds, because we co-evolve with forest and nature, right? Nature is essential for human existence in so many ways. And most of nature's contributions to people are absolutely not fully replaceable or even irreplaceable. And that's a statement from the highest scientific advisory council on biodiversity and ecosystems for the UN. Storing carbon, this is the topic we're focusing on today, but I want to make sure that I emphasize this point really importantly. It's just a little bit, a tiny little bit of what nature provides us with, right? Much of nature's provisioning, regeneration, supporting, consists of much more than just carbon. It's like food, soil formation, even aesthetics and getting inspired to create new art. That is all what nature provides us with. And that, unfortunately, is very hard to capture. But let's look into carbon, because we are talking a little bit about the environment and the climate crisis. So much of we know that trees store carbon, because at the moment the tree grows, the bark consists of a lot of like carbon that is extracted from CO2. And you can imagine these trees to be wonderful piggy banks of carbon that help us like mitigate the climate crisis. But the problem is this goes the other way as well. when a tree stores carbon and you burn it, then all the carbon that is stored over hundreds of years, sometimes a tree can get old as 1,000 years, gets all released back in the atmosphere. And unfortunately, we are in a period of time in the history of humanity that our natural world has been deteriorating in rates unparalleled. It's never been as fast as now. And the drivers are deforestation, urbanization, shifting agriculture. We treat forests badly. We have consistent wildfires that are due to monocultures. So we're losing forests at an unprecedented scale. So much so that back before humanity really like settled, most of our world was like 57% forest and 42% like grass. But nowadays we have cut down half of the world's forest that has ever existed and replace it with crops and grazing lands. And this is really unfair because most of the forest that is being cut is right now is in the tropical regions in South America, while smaller forests in Europe are getting regenerated right now because we have already cut everything and have moved on with our industry towards a more service-based industry, but tropical countries are still heavily reliant on agriculture and the beef industry, for example, which requires grazeland. Again, it's a huge issue, so much so that if you would take tropical deforestation as an emission source for the world, let's say we take it as a country, the CO2 that gets out because we're burning and destroying nature and forest would be bigger than all of the CO2 emissions of the European Union combined. It would be, in fact, the third largest country. It would be a country right after China and the US, 18% of global anthropogenic emissions. And not only that, I mean, I mentioned that it's really, really important to emphasize the value of nature beyond carbon, and it's linked to many planetary emergencies. It's linked to the destruction of biodiversity, where we have 80% of life on land lives on the forests, right? And we're losing a species getting extinct due to deforestation every half an hour. And I don't want to even like start with talking about the human lives that are living in these forests, right? If we imagine forests, oftentimes we imagine that with birds and with nature and like, right? But like, we don't often see humans in it when we imagine nature, but in fact, humans, indigenous humans especially, are a core part of nature and nature stewards. 500 million people are living in the forest, and illegal deforestation robs them not only of their cultural heritage, but also from their homes. Deforestation is changing our climate, harming our people and the natural world, and we must and can reverse the trend. So now let's talk about some hopeful things. We know that we can reverse the trend. We can plant trees, and that could potentially cut up to 10% of the global emissions. There are carbon offset projects. When you're flying, for example, you're always paying a little bit of extra money nowadays to be carbon neutral. And that money goes into these projects that plant trees, that protect forests, that avoid deforestation, right? Because there's an estimated impact of how much tons of CO2 that can basically restore back into nature. And here are like 3 different types of it, with its like CO2 impact per hectare. And how this is usually done, and now we're slowly moving into the AI part, is that usually we compare an area we protect. This is how carbon credits are issued with, okay, this is the area that it's protected. And what if it would not have received the money? What would this area look like? And the difference between the destruction that would have occurred and my protection, that's the credit that I will issue. And you can already feel like there could be some problems when we do it like this way, because this red line is what we call a counterfactual, something that would not have happened, but we cannot really detect how or what this exactly looks like. So, and then lastly, I want to listen, have you listen again. This is another forest. And this forest is very close to the actual forest the first time you hear it, but this forest has no life even here. And the reason is here people just planted trees for the sake of carbon. And again, I mentioned the emphasis of nature must be observed as a holistic entity. And when you only plant one single tree here, a eucalyptus that grows really fast, you derive nature from its natural state. And Eucalyptus is a very toxic tree, destroys the soil and doesn't allow any life to live beyond it. And that's why you can hear no sounds of birds, for example. So we really want to make sure that these projects are fine and protecting and also open and that they don't hurt nature. But at the same time, we want to make sure that the communities that are protecting nature are getting rewarded, right? And how we're doing this right now, how the world is evaluating these carbon offsets is basically they go into the forest and they measure each tree and they estimate how big this tree is and how much CO2 it has stored. And they go and measure tree by tree by tree by tree by tree by tree. And you can imagine how tedious that is. In fact, it costs $300 per hectare to do so. So only these big mega projects can afford this measuring, which is manual and super expensive. And that prevents these local communities from getting money, which is bad because like we have promised a lot of money. We know this problem of climate. And now, because of this measuring taking so much time, these communities are not getting any money. This is where AI can help because we can, as I've shown you already, the acoustic data, the satellite data, all that, you don't need to go into the forest to see that. You can see if a forest is getting destroyed just from the satellite data. You can see it when you fly a drone above it. And you can see it when you can hear that there are no life of birds in it. And that's how we basically use AI. We fuse all these data sets together, train machine learning models to take over this manual label like monitoring process and hopefully create an automatic monitoring process that is more fair and more scalable and could also potentially support local communities. So machine learning has and can help us understand the location, health, and ecological value of nature and biodiversity at scale, and that's really important. And these then can be ensured that these metrics are reflected in policy, finance, and decision-making. So basically how this whole big picture would look like, someone needs the report of your forest conservation, and these are the stakeholders that would like to pay you for protecting the land. And usually you collect this field data, right? But now how AI would look like is you have this satellite component that can provide additional information that you don't require as field data. Second, we could improve field data collection using manual, instead of manually going and measuring a tree, you can maybe take a picture of a tree and then that gets automatically translated into carbon. Or you can decentralize monitoring, reporting, verification. You can allow everyone to just submit data, citizen science style, and then machine learning algorithms can like make sense of all the data that is gathered, not from a central institute that charges a lot of money, but from the farmer himself, for example. So let's have a look quickly on the remote sensing part, how we do this. So we have a lot of satellite images that come in different resolutions. Like this is the same site in Colombia. One on the right side is a commercial satellite provider. On the left side is, for example, public satellite images from NASA and the European Space Agency. And then what we're basically doing is like, we fly a drone above it and we use the satellite data as well. We use a machine learning algorithm to combine both data sources. And we can see that by combining those two data sources, we have a much better classification of forest here. For example, here we're classifying mangroves on the top only with satellite data, and in the bottom, satellite data and drone data combined. And we can also detect, for example, using satellite data plus some Wikipedia pages and some additional text information, what is it that drives this deforestation area? For example, we can predict the driver of deforestation. Is it urbanization? Is it agriculture? Is it wildfire? And that helps the policymaker to do also decisions and also estimate the impact of your conservation efforts. And we can use the large time series, as you've seen in the first slide. We can actually see the change of deforestation when we put satellite after satellite after satellite image afterwards. And then you can really see the changes. And just seeing alone is oftentimes enough to judge if a project is good or bad. And here, for example, we're using an algorithm that is trained on this time series of satellite data. And everything which is red is basically the predicted deforestation on the bottom, and on the top is the real deforestation. So it comes very close and can give you a sense of spread as well and of risk zones of deforestation. And lastly, again, right, like you can use potentially, instead of like labeling with like a measurement band, just take a picture of a tree, and then that tree gets automatically classified with, for example, from the type of the bark, what kind of species the tree is, and how big the tree is. So we can also improve the lives of communities on the ground as well. And yeah, let's have a quick look how this data looks like to show you how the power of AI could already be used. So this is from GainForest. Our nonprofit is providing a visual platform for you to explore the data. And I usually start with this example. Have you ever wondered where your carbon offset goes when you're flying? It goes, for example, to one of these projects, VCS 960. And this project I can already give you, is a sketchy project because it sells 1 ton of carbon credit for less than $1. To give you an insight, in order to get 1 ton of carbon out of the atmosphere, you need to plant 15 trees. This is a tree planting project. And whoever has ever planted a tree knows that it costs not 6 cents to plant a tree. It breaks the bank, it's super tedious, it's hot. So how can they get it that cheap? Any guesses? So when we look at the satellite image, everything which is green, this is the protected area you're paying basically when you click on EasyJet offsetting, for example. They actually paid that. And then you can see that here, for example, this area is green, but this area on the left side looks exactly like the area on the right side. So what's going on here? Why is that one thing green and protected and the other not? And if you zoom in further, you can, for example, no AI needed, you can see the type of the trees. And these trees are all the same trees. It's a monoculture. And this is a very significant monoculture because you can see here the patterns, they are almost row-based. So what this is, what you're seeing right now here, is actually a commercial timber plantation. So these people have been planting these trees nonetheless to cut them. But they basically applied for carbon offsets as a cherry on the top. Just as a cherry on the top, why not, right? And that's why they can sell it cheap. And that's a problem. And with data, with AI, we can see these problems, we can monitor them, we can reveal the sketchiness of these mega projects and hopefully support projects that are very honest. But I want to end this talk with one important point, saying that, okay, AI is not a silver bullet here, and we still need humans on the ground. So it's not enough to just replace satellite images with the whole monitoring process. We did a small experiment. We sampled from 6 sites all trees that are all on this site. And then we took popular AI algorithms and estimated, okay, what they predict, how much carbon there is, and what is what we measured. And we saw that for very small sites, the AI is still very unfair and overestimates, for example, by an error of 10, how much carbon there is actually. So it's really, really important to not just rely on AI because AI itself is still very errors. So a better solution would be to actually involve indigenous communities in this whole monitoring, reporting, verification process of the thing. So basically involving their insights, combining that with a lot of advanced data. And one really beautiful example is here. So remember these baselines I showed you? One is basically here, the baseline is like orange, but what would have happened if we didn't protect it? And the blue one is basically, okay, what is actually what would have happened was. So basically here, this orange one was like, okay, we predicted this is going to happen, but then this is what we measure. And you can see from all these 16 projects that are very official projects, only one project hits it really well with the prediction and what actually came out to be. And the reason why this one project hit it really well is from all these 16 projects, only this one project actually involved indigenous communities to make this prediction into the future. So that's just one really, really great example of where we really cannot underestimate the value where communities can bring into algorithm development. So local communities are super important, and they have to be involved in the co-design of impactful technology, because otherwise you're just developing technology that no one's going to use in the end, and it's also like bad quality. So finally, to conclude with some lessons learned, when we develop AI in this space, it needs to be transparent and open because we monitor, and our monitoring has to be open as well. We need to co-design with local communities. We need to be aware of the data ownership, of scenario-specific metrics, because again, otherwise we are building useless tools. And working at the intersection of nature conservation and artificial intelligence forces you to be very interdisciplinary in your research, because nature itself has always been good, and there's no question that nature, investing in nature and emphasizing nature is good. But the problem why some of these projects are sketchy is not because nature is sketchy, it's because some of the human behavior is wrongly incentivized. And therefore it's really, really important that when we develop like algorithms that check, we also need to think about how a human could potentially game these algorithms, play around with it. So I cite here Goethe-Institut's law. Usually when a measure becomes the goal, it ceases to be a good measure. And yeah, thank you so much for your attention, and I'm open for questions.